what's going on with Tank Dell, my kid, great kid, man, love him to death, recruited him, got hurt again for the second time. I had a short viral video I'm going to put out today, a few of those that I went off on his offensive coordinator. This is the second wideout that's been injured because of friendly fire, I like to call it, Doc. Basically the wide receiver in the same area at the same time. This is inexcusable offensive play calling, continues to happen. This is why he broke his leg. No one else talked about it on mainstream media. I broke it down with Smitty yesterday. There's 4 people in a box of 3 yards, Doc. Inexcusable as an offensive play call in the NFL. That guy should never even be close to Tank Dell in that route concept. We continue to see it in Houston. That's why C.J. Stroud has hit a wall, in my opinion. Bobby Slovic is an issue. Tank Dell got hurt last year, Doc, on the same leg because he went into a loaded box in the red zone and tried to block a 6'6", 295-pound D in at 165 pounds. Again, offensive coordinator malpractice.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Tank Dell's struggling. Break down his injury for us because I want to hear it from you. I do not really know still. I've talked to Tank, but I do not know what is really going on.
I don't know if he fully understands.
No, he don't know. Yeah.
And so you can relay this to him. I'll have a video out in a little bit, kind of breaking it down. He might not have to like what I have to say, but maybe that gives him a little motivation. This is the same leg as last year. Last year, he broke this bone. This year, he dislocated his knee. What does that mean? It means that 3 of the 4 ligaments in here usually have to tear to the point where this moves this way and this moves the other way. So instead of being like this, now they're like this. Initially, if you look at the angle of how he slid, and we'll talk about why it happened in a second, you can see a bone or something that doesn't look linear. Instead of it being flat, you see kind of like this. And that tells me either he fractured his femur, he broke this, which he didn't, or at least we don't think he did, or he dislocated his kneecap, which is possible, but it was likely more than that, or he dislocated his knee. And unfortunately, it was the worst of the 3. It was a dislocation. The only thing that, in my opinion, would have made this worse is if he fractured a bone and it popped through the skin. That's what happened to Alex Smith, to give you reference. Okay, so what happened here and why did it happen? I think his weight, unfortunately, plays a role here. If that was Nico Collins, I don't think it would have happened because he's got a lot more force to run through that player than Dell. But the issue I have is, first of all, why was that player there? His teammate. Right. So and he just got called up from the practice squad. Was he supposed to be there?
Right.
That's a valid question. The second question is, if that player wasn't there, then Dell doesn't have to stop, right? Or he's catching, but I think he only slid because the other guy was there. I think he would have probably tried to catch it standing up. Even if he didn't catch it standing up, he would have been able to slide through, and there's nothing, maybe his cleat catches the turf, but besides that, there's nothing stopping his energy from not dissipating into the air, into the grass. But when you have a force, almost like a wall, so even if his left knee or left leg gets caught and his right leg goes through, it doesn't matter. You went from full speed to stop on a dime. And is it possible that this being fractured led to some instability here, which predisposed it here? I could justify it. I don't know.
So
it's kind of a moot point.
Let me be clear. You're saying there was no compound fracture as we know it.
So they've released some, and I'll tell you how I know some of this stuff. So from what we understand, he dislocated his knee and he tore his ACL. The initial report was that he dislocated his kneecap, and that's it. That ended up being false. He might have dislocated his kneecap, but unfortunately, he dislocated his knee.
So that's a difference. The whole knee, not just the kneecap.
Correct.
I got you.
The last time we have reference of this in the NFL that comes to mind is Teddy Bridgewater. Okay. That's the only one that I can think of off the top of my head.
So what you saw with the pad displacement was the actual knee being dislocated, not the kneecap.
And that's why they went and stabilized him. They put how they put the air cast, like that kind of.
Yeah.
They put that from his hip to his ankle. Whole leg. So that tells you that there's a lot of instability there. Not only that, they brought the ambulance out. You don't see a whole lot of ambulance unless it's a neck injury. So they
Right.
literally brought the ambulance to him because it was so risky to move him. If University of Kansas was farther away, they probably would have helicoptered him. But it was only 12 miles, so it's not really worth it to just tell people to get out of the way and you'll be fine. He reportedly went back to Houston the next day or somewhere around there. What does that tell me? That tells me that he didn't likely suffer any open fractures
Okay.
or any injuries to the blood vessels behind the knee. And that can happen if you
That was my
dislocate
word.
your knee. You can tear a blood vessel behind, usually the artery, behind the knee. And when that happens is all the blood flow from that blood vessel no longer goes down to the foot, and that foot starts to die. The tissue starts to necrose. And that is a medical, one of the few orthopedic emergencies, and he would have been in the OR within an hour. The fact that he hasn't had surgery yet means that he pretty much didn't tear that any vasculature.
So that's a
Did
good.
he injure a nerve? Okay, that's possible. But they're not going to, they'll let that kind of heal or fix things. The severity of the knee injury is significant. And so people are saying, hey, this is what Nick Chubb did in college or Nick Chubb did last year. No, this is not what Nick Chubb had 2 bad injuries,
Yeah.
but neither were nowhere near as bad as this. That's the problem here. Okay.
Hold on. Nick Chubb last injury, not even close to this one?
No. Why?
Damn.
Because Nick Chubb had a bad MCL and a bad ACL. But in order to dislocate a knee, you have to tear at least 3, and sometimes what we call the capsule and some of the other stuff that holds the knee together. And the only reason that Nick Chubb didn't suffer what this was last year is because his knee was reconstructed years ago at Georgia, and that likely prevented some of that full force. And he's a bigger guy too. He's much thicker.
Yeah.
The issue here is that if he tore his MCL, which I'm assuming he did, we know his ACL is torn. That means he's going to have a 2-stage revision, which is what Chubb had. Why? Because you cannot reconstruct the ACL if the MCL or LCL are unstable, because you need to be able to put stability on the knee once the ACL has been reconstructed. So what you would do is you'd reconstruct the MCL first,
Let it heal.
wait about 6 weeks, then once it's stable, then you reconstruct the ACL or whatever else.
Damn.
This is a significant injury. 2025 is out of the question, not realistic at all. The question is this career ending?
Ooh.
And I don't know. I won't put it past him. He's 25. He's still young. But think about it from a Teddy Bridgewater perspective. In my opinion, he was never the same player after that. But he didn't need to run and stop on a dime and cut and rotate and run. He didn't need to do any of that like a wide receiver has to do. So now you're asking him, who has significant instability, and not just one ligament like Puka had earlier. This is at least 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, not including any meniscus, any cartilage injury, any fractures. So there's a lot of moving parts here. We haven't heard full analysis yet, but unfortunately, this is significant. And I'd be curious to see if the surgeon that did Tua's hip, Dr. I have it in my computer somewhere. He's a trauma surgeon in Houston, actually. He's one of the best. He was the one who did Tua's hip. Is this the severity and the level of care of surgeon that they need, or can a traditional ortho surgeon do this? Not trauma surgeon.
Is it Dr. Chip Route?
Yeah, Route. That's what it is. Yeah, that's who did. That's who did Tua's, and I wouldn't be surprised if they at least talked to him about it.
In Tank's, I texted him yesterday. In Tank's case here, so people don't understand out here. The kneecap is like a floating bone surrounded by cartilage and ligaments that can displace, and you can actually pop it back. I've had mine pop back.
Correct.
This is not a kneecap. I see a lot of chat people. This is a knee. This is the
initially Rappaport said kneecap, which is why I think people.
Yes.
But if you don't, and I actually screenshotted it, Schefter's, just to make sure I wasn't reading it wrong. It is true knee, not a kneecap. If it was a kneecap, not a huge deal. He would be fine.
Kneecap, he'd have been bad. Shit, he'd be fine.
Correct. So there's different levels of kneecap. I'll kind of clarify this. If you just dislocate your kneecap, but you don't tear what we call MPFL, and I'll tell you what that is in a sec. you'll have a Mahomes situation from a couple years ago. He came back like 3 weeks later. Okay, maybe in a route runner, maybe a little bit different, maybe not quite as quickly, but that's not a huge deal. If you tear the MPFL, which is the ligament that holds the kneecap in place, and the only way you can get this kneecap to be over here is if you tear the MPFL. It doesn't stretch that far, and the MPFL basically holds the kneecap kind of in place like this. So you pretty much have to tear it so that it can do whatever the heck it wants. They would reconstruct that. It takes about 6 months, and then he would start running routes and so on and so forth.
Is this kind of like Lattimore, South Carolina running back that blew out his shit? Is this similar to that, or a Napoleon McCallum type of thing, or what is it?
I don't know the references for those, so I'd have to look it up off the top of my head. But what
was his name? Lattimore, South Carolina. I forgot. I think he
It's
tore
Marcus
like
Lattimore,
3.
but yeah,
there's not too many injuries worse than this in the knee. This is pretty much. I mean, yes, there's always crazy.
This is one of the worst knee injuries you could possibly sustain.
Correct.
God,
unfortunately, and
hate to hear that.
You know, I think his size plays a role. You know, he's 165, 5'8", 5'9", somewhere in there. You know, so it is what it is, right? That's kind of what makes him good, right? Obviously, but at the same time, he doesn't have a whole lot of muscle mass on there. He doesn't have a whole lot of energy that he can plow through that player. You know, I think it was Jared Wayne. But either way, it's just an unfortunate injury, and he's going to have to move mountains to even have a semi-functioning normal knee. Never mind NFL caliber knee.
Man, we can't.
Happy to help whenever I can.
Yeah, we can't. Yeah, I'm gonna. You know, he's from your area, so I'll see what's going on. If he's down there, I might have to connect you guys because I'm sure he'll be home now doing this, and not in Houston. So we'll see. I know him and CJ are boys, so they'll be doing this a lot of stuff in the off season once the Texans season ends. But we're